Let's get into our first topic now, shall we? And is it time to axe the BBC licence fee? Get your calls in for this one now. We're asking this after the BBC's Director General Tim Davie and CEO of News Deborah Turness resigned last night. That's after a leaked BBC memo suggested a Panorama documentary misled viewers by editing a speech by Donald Trump. Impartiality concerns were also raised over coverage of Gaza and trans issues. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch said that the BBC should not expect the public to keep paying the licence fee unless it can demonstrate true impartiality. And Reform UK leader Nigel Farage had a warning of his own.
My worry would be for the BBC if we get the wrong Director General and this continues, that I would say this is the last chance for the BBC and you will see millions refusing to pay the licence fee.
So do you want the licence fee gone, Nelufar?
No, I don't think so. Three things that are really important in this. First of all, I think the BBC did the right thing by essentially figuring out what the process was, where it went wrong, trying to make people accountable for it and allowing that accountability to have the effect that it's had. One. Two, an entire organisation as big as the BBC cannot be judged on the mistakes of one line in one programme. That would be, most people would say, insane to say that this one thing happened and therefore the entire institution must be dismantled. And three, I've worked for the BBC, I've made programmes for them, I've presented news round, I know the BBC, and I cherish and respect the journalists and the programme makers within the BBC. But the power that the BBC gives us in the UK is, as the soft power that we get from it, is unparalleled, in my opinion. The BBC bureaus that exist around the world, the fact that we make and break news through the BBC on par with places like Reuters and the Associated Press, makes it a powerhouse. And if we lose that, because someone will pay top dollar for the BBC if they're allowed to. If we lose that, we lose so much more than Strictly Come Dancing or, The Traitors or anything like that. This is an institution that is a powerhouse, and mistakes can be made in anything that's over nearly 100 years old or so. And I just think we have to be really careful when we talk about the BBC and understand that there are good journalists working there.
But Angela, it isn't just one line on one programme, is it?
No, it isn't. Respectfully, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. And this has been the problem with this discussion. I don't mean here, but generally, that the Panorama issue was obviously very revealing of an egregious trashing of editorial standards. But it follows a long line, a really, really shocking roll call where there has been systematic bias, failings within the organisation, the things that you've mentioned, not sort of, robustly prosecuting trans ideology, the systematic bias in its coverage of Gaza, which has provided ammunition to anti-Semites. This is our public-funded broadcaster. It had a contract with the public that we would provide you with the highest standard of journalism, impartial reporting, and we in return pay for that state-funded broadcaster. And it has failed robustly, and it failed again and again and again. So, for example, only recently, Tim Davie was at Glastonbury. He was there when Pop Violent made those absolutely disgusting incitement to hatred remarks about calling out death to the IVF, calling out people to kill people. He was there and he didn't immediately pull the plug. And there were 500 people at Glastonbury. It's been going on for years and years. And the problem with the BBC, it has been so repetitively complacent and weakening. I used to call him Teflon Tim because it seemed like nothing stuck. I actually went to see Tim Davie in an independent capacity at one point because I was so shocked at the way that it was covering the Gaza war and in terms of what it was doing in terms of the repercussions in terms of anti-Semitism. We can discuss the politics of Gaza another time, I'm not talking about that now. And again and again, it was like, we don't have a problem. I chaired in Manchester the largest gathering, a live audience of senior BBC representatives to be challenged by the community. Why don't you call Hamas terrorists? Why do we consistently hear of all these different failings? They refuse to hear it. And even now, when you listen to Shah's letter about what's happened and Tim Davie's resignation, there's no real contrition there. Now, I was brought up with the BBC and it pains me deeply to say these things. I didn't want it ever to come to this.
So what do you think should be done then? You want the licence axed?
I think.
Do you want the BBC axed?
So the BBC, all the things you say are right, Nelufar, and, you know, being much older than you, very long in the tooth here, probably the two of you put together, I was brought up on it. It was the place we went to for all the great moments in news, and that has been trashed. So I think what's going to have to happen now is you can't be assured of your audience because of this blanket licence fee. We'll need a subscription model. Because what will then happen is the BBC will be forced to be more competitive and hike up its standards. And again, I must stress once and for all that I'm so sorry it has come to this.
It's
really sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. It is absolutely paramount that we do not have a subscription model for a public service broadcaster.
Isn't the model at the moment outdated though? And if so, what do you do?
No, it isn't, because it imbues within the BBC a charter. The charter states exactly what it's supposed to do. It can fall short over its 100-year-old history, and we should hold it accountable. But to
hold on, I've just listed a few things that have happened in the last couple of years.
I agree with you, but there are people equally on the other side of the Gaza-Israel war who would say the exact opposite. In fact, a couple of days ago, 100 BBC journalists anonymously claimed the exact opposite. One thing about the BBC is, and this has been often charged...
200 members of staff at the BBC claimed there was institutionalised anti-Semitism there. We can certainly argue with the numbers here. I think there's a much bigger issue.
No, but that's
the public trust.
If I could just finish the point. I agree with you. It has been trashed, and I agree with you that it needs to be brought back. But one thing that's true is the BBC is often chastised, criticised, and, you know, held to account and hated on both sides of the aisle. And that is, in my opinion, a sign of it doing the right thing. As they're demanded to be unbiased in whatever reporting that they do. And when I was there, it was taken very, very seriously. It can fall short, I agree with you, but a subscription model is not the way. That's not going to solve this.
Let's just take a closer look at those figures that we're talking about at the BBC licence fee. I think we can bring up the numbers now. So it's £174.50. That's what we are paying a year. All of that added together, I think, gives the BBC £3.8 billion. I think that amounts to something like 65% of their income. That comes from 24 million households, 24 million licences. But interestingly, around 300,000 households have stopped paying in the last year. Now, that number does seem small, but I suppose if that happens year on year, the BBC is in big trouble. We'll go to the phones now and speak to James from Shropshire. What do you think about the licence fee? Are you annoyed that you have to continue paying it?
Yeah, hi, Storm. Thank you for having me on. Thank you very much indeed. Well, first of all, the first thing I'd like to say is thank God for the BBC. And I'm an atheist. The BBC is without doubt the best broadcasting organisation in the world. Have you ever watched CNN or Fox News? You know,
yes.
If you look at them, you'll know what I mean. One's to the far right,
but
one's
James,
to the far
we
left.
have seen big failings in the BBC lately. Not just, I suppose, in impartiality, but I suppose Greg Wallace comes to mind, Hugh Edwards comes to mind. Their reputation is in tatters at the moment. And I suppose, I'm wondering, can you understand why the general public would be outraged that they have to continue, if they have a TV in their house, not even as if they consume the BBC, just if they have a TV in the house, they have to pay over £170 a year for the pleasure?
Well, listen, Storm, listen. I would pay that £175 or whatever it is for Radio 4 Extra, okay? I listen to that all the time because I have tinnitus, etc. Now, if people looked at that Radio 4 Extra and listened to it an awful lot, they'd say, hey, my 175 or whatever has been used very well. You know, the programmes on it are absolutely fantastic. I was listening last night and there was... Raise a Laugh, I'm trying to think of the Inheritance tracks, Whodunits, etc., etc. People don't realise what, as far as, they think it's just this news broadcaster. I would say that anybody that criticises the BBC, just look a little bit deeper into everything else they do. Yes, they've made some terrible mistakes just lately, there's no doubt about it. But
it's interesting that you bring up the programmes they make, James, and actually a lot of other companies may not have the finances to make those programmes because maybe they aren't guaranteed hits initially. So the BBC does give itself a little bit more flexibility in that way. I would add on to that even further, James, if we stop paying the licence fee, we're going to get rid of local radio, we're going to get rid of local journalism.
So that's why I would say respectfully to you, James, and I think you're right, I'm a massive fan of vast amounts of the output of the BBC, not the news, I'm talking about, I'm addicted to loads of stuff, everything from the reunion on Radio 4 to Desert Island Discs. I love it, which is why I sort of almost think you've given us a very articulate argument for a subscription model, because what you've said is you've sort of cherry-picked the part of the output which you feel, and I agree with you, is peerless. Look at the drama that they produce.
Yeah,
it's
but if
such
we go to a subscription model, the news outlet up in Elgin, for example, or up in the islands, will disappear. There isn't
They
enough
have
people
disappeared.
to
We have
fund
seen
it.
with The Guardian, we have seen
that.
with the New York Times, we have seen with NPR, we have seen with many, many entities. The first thing to go is regional and local news. And those are the most devoted audiences. Those are the audience that need it more than anything. Some of the biggest shows on the BBC are not commercially successful, but they are necessary for a healthy country, a healthy economy, a healthy society. And one more thing, for less than a cup of tea, at the local community centre, you get all of that. It's great value for money, and I love the way James put it.
How much is a cup of tea at the local community centre?
55p.
I'm going to the wrong places for my cup of tea.
How many times are you having your cup of tea?
No, I'm saying less than a day. So it's
a day.
147,
Okay. All right.
£174.50.
Got you.
But if you're currently forced to fund an organisation which
75p.
if you're currently forced to fund an organisation which is entirely antithetical to the things that you feel are morally right, then it's very hard. We need to incentivise the BBC to be better. It's a shame it's been brought to this, but they've had so many chances to stand up and say, we got this wrong, we're firing this, we're calling this one to be responsible for it, and they have failed.
I would argue...
James, thank you very much for your call. Craig from Northamptonshire, what's your view?
Yes, I think it should be axed. I mean, I've not paid mine for many years. I did some work for the BBC abroad many years ago, and I saw how much money they spent on their expenses, and it was absolutely astronomical. And another occasion, a cameraman had his camera seized at a checkpoint, and these cameras are worth well over £50,000 brand new. And he was going out of country, so I said to him, I said, "No, give me your receipt that they've given you, and I'll go and pick up your camera for you. I'll get it for you." He went, "Nah, don't bother. I'll keep the receipt. I can hand it in London, and I'll get a new camera. I fancy a new one." So I thought, okay, and that's why the money wasted was unbelievable.
All right.
I got told on Craig that whatever you do on your expenses, because he just give me a wad of cash.
Craig,
Said,
that must have been some number of years ago, because I do think the expenses have been reduced over the years. I've worked for the BBC, and it did not feel like that. I can tell you that much. I would be having to go back to the airport to get that camera by hook or by crook. Craig, thank you very much for your call. Don't go anywhere though, because we are taking your calls on this after the break. Should the BBC licence fee be axed? 0207. Before the break, we asked in Roald Dahl's Matilda, which Olympic sport did Miss Trunchbull compete in? And the answer is, of course, the hammer throw. Welcome back. We are live on 5. Nelufar and Angela still here with me. Now, don't forget, later we are debating whether it is okay to wear a white pacifist poppy. And should families on benefits be able to get more free food? That's another debate we're having later. But now we're taking more of your calls on whether the BBC licence fee should be axed following an impartiality row. 0207 862 2222 is the number. We'll go straight to those phone lines and speak to Jason from Hampshire. Are you annoyed about having to spend over £170 a year on your licence fee?
I think it's absolutely criminal.
The
cost? To be very honest with you.
The cost or what they're doing, or their lack of impartiality at times?
Everything. The cost, the lack of it. I mean, to be honest, I'd sooner watch Channel 4 News than BBC.
Okay.
Because I find the BBC News is very biased. It's not factual half the time, and I'm thinking, really? And when the licence is due to go up in the spring to £181, and you get all the scandals from Strictly, Hugh Edwards, Jimmy Savile, and all the others.
Well,
why are we
Jimmy Savile is going back a bit, Jason, but I totally take your point. Isn't it fair to say...
It's scandals for the BBC, though, isn't it?
But with an organisation that size, and it is a massive organisation, there are bound to be, and I hate this expression, a few bad apples.
Well, there was more than a few, I think.
All right. Nelufar, what do you say to that?
The respect that the BBC commands internationally as a news organisation, but as well as a company that makes content, is unmatched.
Do you think they still do with all of these stories coming out now?
Of course.
Because these are global stories.
Of course. Okay, listen, this particular Michael Prescott, who is the whistleblower that came out and made the dossier on which these things are based on, the fact that people have resigned, he absolutely makes the points clear, and the BBC hold the people account to what he said. Absolutely. But that doesn't... It tarnishes the brand. It doesn't get rid of the importance of the brand. The BBC genuinely, around the world... I was in Norway, I was in the Netherlands last week, I was in America a couple of weeks ago. The BBC still is considered one of the most prestigious organisations in the world.
Do you feel the same way about the royal family?
But we, the public, own the BBC. We don't own the royal family. We, the public, have a say in how the BBC is done. And one more thing, we keep talking about in this conversation, this idea of we should make it a subscription. It is. You can choose not to pay the licence fee if you do not watch the BBC. It's not just if you have a television in your home. You can...
I don't know if that's true.
You can't, because you've got no other way.
Yes, you can. If you watch the iPlayer, then you have to pay it, whether you have it on your laptop or on a TV. You can choose not to pay it if you do not watch BBC services.
So what happens if you want to watch...
So it is a subscription
you want to watch ITV or maybe Channel 5 doesn't show everything.
4.
Yeah, or Channel 4
News.
And they don't show everything.
Channel 4 News.
Yeah, you've got to have a telly. How is he going
to get away with not paying a subscription?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the problem is, it's interesting what you say about travel abroad, and I know for every story there's a counter story, and we're anecdotalising. I fully respect that. I spent the last month for work and a little bit of family stuff travelling in Greece, Cyprus and Israel. And people, not just Jewish people, it was almost they were laughing at the BBC. And I felt embarrassed and upset that was what it had come to. It is the great British brand. I know we're going to talk about poppies shortly. Look at the role the BBC played in the war, disseminating information, or the great moments of state, the great news stories where the inclination was to look to the BBC to give us impartial reporting as defined by the Charter. There have been too many flashpoints where they've just been arrogant or complacent enough to not do something about it.
They've also just double-checked in the gallery, and you do have to pay a licence fee if you want to watch live television.
Yes, but if you don't, then you don't have to pay.
But that means no live TV on Channel 4, ITV or any of the other channels.
But you can choose not to, though. But you can choose not to. That is absolutely a subscription model.
All right, Jason, thank you very much for your call. Ryan from Kent, what's your thoughts?
Oh, hi there. First of all, thanks for having us on. I can't agree more that it is protecting a trusted source of information. I think we're in a time of, misinformation, algorithm-driven media bubbles, and this is a publicly funded and editorial independent broadcaster.
But hold on, if they're augmenting the president's speech, can we trust it to give us a true depiction of what happened?
I think broadly speaking, it's not funded by investors, and we're not. You can talk openly about political views without having the risk of losing finance. But I think my main point that I wanted to say is it invests so much into UK creativity and culture. A lot of people are talking about the news, but this is a licence fee that supports British drama, documentaries, music, and regional reporting. It helps to sustain jobs for UK writers, actors and filmmakers. And oftentimes that launches careers that later enrich the global creative industry.
Oh, brilliant.
Don't you think,
Ryan?
therefore, that was exactly... I agree with you, but that's precisely where the failing of the top brass lay. Because in allowing this absolutely dumbing down, trashing or ignoring of editorial standards, look at the cost it could have, all the people abandoning the licence fee, for all the very important points that you've made, the peerless drama, all the creativity, so the many wonderful programmes that have come out of the BBC. Because when trust is lost with a brand, I'm trying to think of a comparison. If you hear that a major chain store has had an outbreak of some kind of food poisoning or something that it provides, you might be less inclined to buy anything from that store, even though it was only one product. And that's the problem. That's where those at the top were so complacent. That's where the failure failing was to not look at all the other aspects of the BBC that would suffer because they didn't deal with the rotten.
But Nelufar's
rot
suggestion is then get rid of the ones that failed the BBC and put in new administration, put in new heads of the news that are going to take it more seriously.
I understand that, but look at the number of occasions where they have simply said, no, not us. Going right back, I know we're not going to talk about Gaza, but the bombing of the Al-Halil hospital, was not Israel, it was a Palestinian jihadi rocket. And Jeremy Bowen said it must have been Israel and then refused to apologise. It's the arrogance and the ramifications of misinformation over and over again.
Ryan, thank you very much. Jean from Derbyshire, what's your thoughts?
Hello. I'm on about the licence, TV licence. I object to paying, and I have been paying all my life since it's been licensed. But I'm thinking now I won't be paying it again. With what we've paid already for the films and everything that's on television the year before, and I do object to paying it again.
So I don't understand, what's your reason for objecting to pay for it?
Well, I watch television from getting up in the morning to going to bed. And like I say, you put it on and the next thing is that you've already seen it. So then
there's too many repeats.
That's interesting.
It is an accusation that is thrown, in particularly around Christmas time, actually, Jean. People get very annoyed that there isn't any new programming. I mean, the BBC would say that's because even with the licence fee, it is underfunded, but they're suffering a cost of living crisis.
So why did they pay over £1 million or whatever to Gary Lineker? I mean, look at the way they distribute the funds that came in. I know he's not with them anymore.
Well, because arguably he was getting the viewers, he was getting the eyeballs on screen.
He was.
Somebody like him again and again failed the editorial requirements of his position, and still, again, I keep using the word complacency. You've got a dedicated viewer there who just wants great output, and we know there's creativity. You mentioned The Traitors, Strictly. There is amazing innovation and imagination there, spoiled by the fact that its news service has become so skewered.
But that's not enough to get rid of it lock stock. It just isn't.
No, you just you reinterpret the model.
Jean, thank you for your call. Douglas from Leicester, what's your view?
Hello. I think the fee is worth match of the day. That's it.
All right, so that goes to defend Angela, argue with Angela's point.
Can I ask you one very quick question, Douglas? Did you care who presented Match of the Day, or did you just want to watch the football and watch the highlights with the analysis? Did it matter when Lineker left? Did it destroy your enjoyment of the programme?
It did slightly because I'm a Leicester man and he's a Leicester man, and he plays for England.
You're a Leicester man. Okay, fair point.
But he was a very loved presenter, wasn't he, Douglas?
Not by everybody.
We get live matches. We get World Snooker Championship, Wimbledon. Those alone are easily works out to about 50 pence each.
Well, but Angela's argument is you would pay that if it was a subscription or a licence fee.
But it shouldn't depend on you being able to afford it.
Okay, Douglas, we're going to have to wrap that up there. Thank you very much for your call. Thanks.